I first met Brian on Sunday, June 16, 1985. That's not quite true. I had met him quite a while earlier when I had read a letter from a teacher nominating him for what turned out to be the first year of the Missouri Scholars Academy, MSA. She had had Brian in her 4th grade class a number of years earlier, but she remained in awe at all she saw in him. It is not surprising that this same teacher, 30 years later, posted on Brian's Facebook page a moving tribute shortly after learning of his death. It is so easy for her, as for all of us, to remember Brian, how unforgettable this blazing comet who soared through his life and through our times. Here was a guy, like so many wonderfully gifted kids, who didn't fit in ordinary ways. And so Brian found a way of doing just that. In 4th grade, as a rising high school junior, when I met him, and through his entire life. Mischief, hilarity, brilliance, kindness, decency, leadership, vision, spontaneity, integrity, such as Brian. A more recent friend and professional colleague, Suzanne Segerman, posted on Facebook with such insightful and succinct accuracy about a young man who found his own way of fitting in. Whatever I may have heard or read about Brian before that warm June day hardly prepared me for what lay ahead. Most kids go off for the first long time away from home a bit apprehensive or obnoxious or both. Not Brian. He came up to me, extended his hand, and initiated what would turn out to be the first of hundreds of conversations with him I was privileged to have had over more than 30 years. The last was this past holiday season when he called late at night to ask whether I had seen a specific recent Jon Stewart Daily Show telecast. He laughed while retelling the episode. How many of us have already started to imagine where Brian is laughing right now? That fabulous, that all-encompassing, that contagious laugh, that smile. MSA operated out of an unair-conditioned set of dormitories in 1985. There were none of the amenities that are part of residence halls 30 years later. Stark is too tame an adjective for the bland institutional plainness of the Loeb halls where MSA housed its participants. Missing, for example, was a swimming pool. Poor Loeb. So Brian set about to solve that. And so he teamed up with new friends. 2 of the co-conspirators are here today, Toby Gilk and Jason Mitchell, and cajoled his resident assistant to go to Walmart to buy a little kiddie pool. No taller than 9 inches in height, it arrived. There was hope for Loeb. Brian's selfless inclusiveness was, even at that early age, central to everything he did and was. And so, with the help of many friends he had quickly made, he and they finagled a hose from a custodian, and together they filled the pool. Throughout his life, Brian included others in his ideas and his schemes. To this day, for example, there are professional colleagues like Chris Urban who thank him for including him in the GMD or IndieWire family. Back to 1985. Once water was in the pool, Brian scrounged around and found something. I believe it was a turtle. And he put it in the mini pool. And he dared everyone to swim with what he daringly named the Loebness Monster. The poor thing was eventually released. Brian himself was a Loebness monster, a fantastic creature who prompted all of us to ask whether, like its Loch Ness namesake, he really exists. Brian really existed. And thanks to the brilliant stuff he created in film, in other media, in social network connections and creations, and so perfect for Brian in transmedia, he continues to exist. The second time I met Brian was when he turned up as a freshman in my honors humanities course in the fall 1987 semester on the campus of the University of Missouri. Those of us who are teachers know that there are classes and that there are classes. What can I say? Brian helped make a wonderful class, one that more than 25 years later stands out. This was in large part due to Brian's own native intelligence itself, nurtured by splendid family support and exemplary K-12 teachers. He had read so much, so well. He had thought about stuff so much while growing up that he became even more of the teacher than was I. And teach he did for all his life, from teaching young friends who had been part of a community what they needed to do thanks to an alumni association which he founded, to keeping the community alive, to taking the formative initial steps on what has become a nationwide organization of programs like MSA, to teaching others how to revolutionize what media and technology and human friendships could create. Many of you here today have read the Facebook comments. You know what I am talking about. As digital creative director Klaus Heisch wrote, "Brian, you challenge us to dig deeper, push further. In that way, you are the great facilitator. Unselfish, brilliance personified." Let me end with a recollection of one of the works we read in our class. Plato's Symposium is a brilliant work that focuses speculation on the nature of love. The dialogue concludes with a famous description of Socrates, this exotic specimen of a human being who, once you peeled away the external veneer of what he looked like, you saw ultimate goodness and beauty and wisdom. Brian reminds me of this. The externals of his years with us are so rich, so breathtakingly different from anything we were used to. We saw so much of what he did, could do, and would do. Our memories of him are so fresh and so painful, but Brian was and is and will be so much more than we did see and will see, like Socrates in Plato's brilliant discussion of an example of love, goodness, and beauty. Brian also never got that external thing called a college degree. Bill Gates didn't, for heaven's sake. Why expect Brian to have done so? But look at what Brian completed in life, way beyond what any external credential might have occasioned or predicted. More educated than any credential might suggest, Brian did more in 46 years than most people do in half again as many. It is his boundless creativity, his inclusiveness, his instinctive knowledge of how, and perhaps more important, why, to build community, his beating and dancing to a different drummer, his turning routine games like chess into spectacular ways in which real human beings could get to know each other. What wonderful qualities for a guy who was impish, funny, irksome, and while interested in the great intellectual legacies from the past, a man who lived beyond time in a future that he helped predict and create. Unselfish brilliance personified. What a perfect summation for Brian Clark, the Loch Ness Monster of our times. There was far more in that brilliance than we ever saw or were even able to see. But all of us, especially his family, were blessed beyond our wildest dreams to have seen all that we did see. Brian, we join your family in mourning your loss. We are so blessed that you fit in by not fitting in. We join friends across our state and our country in thanking you for enriching our lives with those wonderful qualities that Suzanne Segerman drew to our attention: mischief, hilarity, brilliance, kindness, decency, leadership, vision, spontaneity, integrity. Brian, rest in peace.